Welcome to my ready room. I'm Murdoch, and this is 5-Man Trek, where I've got 5 minutes to give you the rundown on a Star Trek vessel. Today we're looking at the Constitution class, the ship that started it all. Before we get into today's ship class briefing, please do like and subscribe if you're enjoying this kind of content. So, before I get too far into this one, I will not be covering the Kelvin timeline Connie here. She's going to get her own video in the future when I cover stuff from that divergence. The Constitution class we all know and love first became a thought in the 2230s when Admiral William Jeffreys and Captain Robert April came to the conclusion that an all-purpose ship to explore space outside of the Federation's borders and protect its interests at the same time was needed. The proposal would eventually be approved and a fitting design would be produced near the end of that decade. The San Francisco Fleet Yards would build 2 ships of that design and specification, the NX 1700 USS Constitution and the NX 1701, or NX 0002. The records are conflicting on this one. At this point, she didn't have a name. The USS Constitution wouldn't have completely finished construction and be employed almost immediately afterwards in the Battle of Donatu 5, where she took a decisive part in the battle, rescuing the USS Yorkshire, but not without taking serious damage in the process. The NX 1701 would get a new for then duotronic computer system designed by Dr. Richard Daystrom himself, which allowed for better system control of the ship. She would get her name Enterprise after a successful secret mission into the Romulan neutral zone. I guess it was an enterprising maiden voyage? Okay, that pun was bad even for me. Enterprise, as we know her, would be captained by 6 individuals over her service life, rather important to both Federation history and to the Constitution class in general. They were Charles Rasmussen, Robert April, Chris Pike, Jim Kirk, and Willard Decker. Okay, not really, because Jim sucked as an admiral, but technically she was Decker's ship at that point. And then at another point as well, she was Spock's. In the early days, the Constitution-class heavy cruisers would be sent on their first 5-year missions after their actual completion and commissionings in 2245. And Starfleet immediately ordered another 9 right after that. They were so hardy and popular, being posted to one was considered a privilege. Fancy that. These vessels were largely kept away from the battlefield during the war with the Klingons at the time. Gee, thanks, Michael Burnham. I got this scar here and lost a few friends in that war. But anyway, the sole exception seemed to be the Defiant because of her border patrol route. The ships would go through retrofit and refit processes almost routinely after each 5-year voyage. They needed to be kept up to date technologically because the new ships like the Crossfield class, aka Discovery, were beginning to outpace them. So much so that by the time the 2270s rolled around, they were considered ancient by fleet-wide standards. So when what we would all acknowledge as the big refit of the Enterprise, it was actually more like they were building an entirely new ship from the ground up, but keeping its internal structure. At least one Constitution refit was still serving well into the late 24th century, and several more were pulled from retirement thanks to Wolf 359 and the Dominion War. Later on, some of these vessels would be pulled out of retirement again to take part in the temporal Cold War. And I thought the Miranda and Celsior classes couldn't catch a break. There are a multitude of Constitution variants and updates, and I'm afraid I won't be able to cover all of them here. But here are a few worth getting some screen time. Next time, we'll look at a class the Packlids would love to mistake every starship for as well.
Oh no! It's another Enterprise!
That's it for this episode. I'll see you in the next one.